Today, Amazon can deliver a package in hours, rent computing power to governments and corporations, stream movies, sell groceries, build artificial intelligence systems, and operate one of the largest logistics networks on Earth. In 2025, the company generated $717 billion in revenue. But the story did not begin with warehouses, cloud servers, satellites, or artificial intelligence. It began with a number: 2,300%. In the spring of 1994, Jeff Bezos was 30 years old and working in New York at D.E. Shaw, a sophisticated investment firm known for using mathematics and computer science in financial markets. Bezos had a strong position, a promising future, and no obvious reason to walk away. Then he came across a statistic that would change his life. Use of the World Wide Web was growing at roughly 2,300% a year. The number was almost absurd. Businesses did not normally grow that fast, but Bezos understood that when something expands at that rate, even from a small base, the important question is no longer whether it matters. The question is what it will become. He began searching for a business that made sense in this new environment. He created a list of 20 products that might be sold online and compared them against one another. Books rose to the top. There were millions of titles in print, far more than any physical bookstore could keep on its shelves. A traditional store was limited by walls, floor space, local demand, and inventory. The internet had no shelf in the physical sense. A digital catalog could offer a selection no ordinary store could match. The idea was simple: use the internet to build a bookstore with nearly unlimited selection. But in 1994, the idea did not look inevitable. Most Americans had never bought anything online. Many had barely heard of the World Wide Web. Entering a credit card number into a computer felt strange. The giants of bookselling were physical chains with famous names, thousands of employees, enormous stores, and deep relationships with publishers. Bezos had none of that. What he had was a theory about the future, and he believed waiting was more dangerous than starting. Years later, Bezos would describe his decision through what he called a regret minimization framework. He imagined himself at age 80 and asked which choice he would regret more: leaving a secure career to try something uncertain, or watching the internet revolution happen without ever participating in it. He decided to leave. Bezos and his wife at the time, Mackenzie, drove across the United States from New York toward Seattle. She drove while he worked on the business plan. He wanted to move quickly. The web was growing too fast for hesitation. In July 1994, the company that would become Amazon was incorporated in Washington state. Its first name was Cadabra. The name did not last. Bezos wanted something that suggested scale, something vast and different. He eventually chose Amazon after the Great South American River. The ambition was obvious even at the beginning. He was not thinking about a small online shop. He wanted to build something enormous. Yet the physical reality could not have looked more modest. The early company operated from Bezos's home in Bellevue, Washington. The first office was simple: a desk, a computer, basic supplies, and the now famous improvised desks made from doors with legs attached to them. That cheap furniture later became a symbol of Amazon's obsession with frugality. Amazon was tiny. It had no proven business model, no massive customer base, no distribution empire, no guarantee that ordinary people would ever become comfortable buying books through a screen. The website opened for business in July 1995. The first book ever sold on Amazon was Fluid Concepts and Creative Analogies by Douglas Hofstadter. At first, the team installed a system that made a sound whenever a customer placed an order. Then, orders began arriving so quickly that the sound had to be turned off. By the end of Amazon's first month in business, the company had shipped books to customers in all 50 U.S. states and 45 countries. That early momentum was extraordinary, but it also created a problem that would define Amazon for years. Growth required speed, and speed required sacrifice. The team packed books by hand. They worked long hours. They built systems while using them. Every new customer created evidence that the idea might work, but also more pressure on a company that was still inventing itself. Bezos was not trying to build a conventional bookstore. He was trying to exploit a structural advantage that physical retailers could not easily copy. A normal bookstore could carry tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of titles, depending on its size. Amazon could display millions. It did not need every book sitting on its own shelves. It could connect a vast online catalog to wholesalers and publishers, source many books after customers ordered them, and use software to organize a selection that no single physical location could hold. This changed the meaning of scale. For centuries, a larger store meant a larger building. Now, a larger store could mean better software. Amazon was not simply putting books on a website. It was beginning to separate retail from physical space. And once that idea worked for books, an uncomfortable question followed. Why stop at books? The answer would come later. For now, Amazon was still a fragile experiment in a young internet economy. The company was growing quickly, but larger competitors could see what was happening. Barnes & Noble, the dominant American bookselling chain, had resources Amazon could barely imagine. Soon, the tiny internet bookstore would be forced into a race against companies with more money, stronger brands, and far greater physical power. Bezos understood the danger. He also understood that Amazon had one advantage no established retailer could buy overnight: time. In a market changing at internet speed, even a small head start could matter. Amazon had started first. Now it had to get big before the giants caught up. And that would require a strategy far more aggressive than simply selling books online. Amazon had survived its first year. Now came the harder question. Could it grow fast enough to survive the companies that were beginning to notice it? By the end of 1995, Amazon was no longer just a strange experiment operating in the shadows of retail. Sales for the year reached just over $500,000. A year later, that figure had exploded to more than $15 million. The growth was breathtaking. It was also dangerous. Every surge in orders created new pressure. More customers meant more books to source, more packages to ship, more servers to maintain, more people to hire, and more money to spend. Amazon was proving that online retail could work, but it was still losing money. For Jeff Bezos, that was not necessarily failure. The company was not being optimized for short-term profit. It was being optimized for scale. The internet was expanding rapidly, customer habits were still forming, and Bezos believed the company that built trust, selection, convenience, and brand recognition first could create an advantage that became harder to attack with every passing year. So, Amazon pushed harder. In 1996, the company raised roughly $8 million in preferred stock financing, led by Kleiner Perkins Caulfield and Byers. Venture capitalist John Doerr joined Amazon's board. The money gave Amazon more room to move, and Bezos used it. Marketing spending rose sharply. Technology spending increased. More employees were hired. The website improved. Amazon invested in systems that could process a growing flood of orders and keep customers coming back. The numbers began to look almost unreal. Average daily visits increased from roughly 2,200 in December 1995 to around 80,000 in March 1997. By then, Amazon had served approximately 340,000 customer accounts in more than 100 countries. Repeat customers were responsible for more than 40% of orders. This was becoming more than novelty. It was becoming habit. But the giants of traditional bookselling were still standing. The most important was Barnes & Noble. It had famous stores, enormous buying power, deep publisher relationships, and a brand known across America. Amazon had a website, a young workforce, and a business model that was still unproven. On paper, it did not look like a fair fight. That was exactly why Bezos could not afford to slow down. Amazon's advantage was not physical size, it was speed. The company could change its website faster than a retail chain could build stores. It could expand its digital catalog without adding miles of shelves. It could study customer behavior, collect reviews, personalize recommendations, and build an experience designed specifically for the internet. Most importantly, it could move while larger competitors were still deciding how seriously to take the web. By early 1997, Amazon was preparing for another enormous step, an initial public offering. Going public would expose the company to far greater scrutiny. Investors would see the losses. Competitors would see the numbers. The world would see exactly how small Amazon still was compared with the corporations it hoped to challenge. But an IPO would also provide capital, and capital meant speed. On May 12, 1997, just days before Amazon's stock market debut, Barnes & Noble filed a lawsuit. The dispute centered on Amazon's claim that it was the world's largest bookstore. Barnes & Noble argued that Amazon was not truly a bookstore because it did not physically warehouse most of the titles it offered. The timing could hardly have been more dramatic. A retail giant was challenging a startup at the exact moment that startup was preparing to ask public investors for money. But Amazon went ahead. On May 15, 1997, the company went public on NASDAQ under the ticker symbol AMZN. The IPO price was $18 per share. Amazon was still young, it was still unprofitable, and its own prospectus warned investors about intense competition, limited operating history, accumulated losses, and the danger that its extraordinary growth rates could not continue forever. Yet investors bought the story, not because Amazon had already won, but because it had become impossible to ignore. In the first quarter of 1996, Amazon generated $875,000 in net sales. 1 year later, in the first quarter of 1997, it generated about $16 million. In only 12 months, quarterly sales had multiplied more than 18 times, and Amazon did not use its new capital to become cautious. It expanded. By the end of 1997, net sales had reached nearly $148 million, up 838% from the previous year. Amazon had approximately 1.5 million customer accounts in more than 150 countries, and repeat customers accounted for more than 58% of orders. But there was another number, a loss of $27.6 million. To a traditional retailer, that might have looked alarming. To Bezos, the more important question was what Amazon was building with that money. The company was lowering prices, spending heavily on marketing, adding technology, strengthening fulfillment, and expanding its customer base. It was choosing future position over present comfort. That philosophy would define Amazon for decades. Long-term market leadership mattered more than short-term appearance. But growth could also hide weakness. A company could look unstoppable while cash burned, infrastructure strained, and losses accumulated. The faster Amazon expanded, the more complex its operation became. More orders required more warehouses. More products required more systems. More customers raised expectations. Scale was becoming Amazon's greatest weapon. It was also becoming a threat. Still, Bezos kept pushing. By November 1997, Amazon had opened a 200,000 square foot distribution center in Delaware and expanded its Seattle distribution center to 85,000 square feet. The bookstore born in a house was becoming a physical machine. And soon, books would no longer be enough. Amazon had learned how to attract customers online. It had built payment systems, recommendation tools, customer accounts, search technology, warehouses, and supplier relationships. Why use that machine for only one category? The answer would transform the company. Amazon was about to move beyond books. It would enter new industries, acquire companies, spend aggressively, and chase the dream of becoming the store for everything. But the timing could not have been more dangerous because the internet economy was racing toward a financial explosion. And when the dot-com fire came, thousands of companies would disappear. Amazon would have to prove that growth alone was not enough. It would have to survive. By 1998, Amazon had proven that people would buy books online. But Jeff Bezos was no longer building a bookstore. He was building a machine. And once the machine could attract customers, process payments, recommend products, and deliver orders, the obvious question was how many different kinds of products it could sell. The answer increasingly was almost anything. In June 1998, Amazon launched its music store. Later that year, it moved into video. It also expanded internationally through acquisitions in the United Kingdom and Germany and acquired the Internet Movie Database, better known as IMDb. The company was moving far beyond its original identity. Books had been the entry point. Now, Amazon wanted to become the place people visited whenever they wanted to buy something online. The speed of expansion was extraordinary. Net sales rose from about $148 million in 1997 to roughly $610 million in 1998. In 1999, they reached $1.64 billion. But the losses were growing too. Amazon spent heavily on technology, marketing, acquisitions, new product categories, international expansion, warehouses, customer service, and the infrastructure needed to handle a level of demand that seemed to increase almost every month. Wall Street, for a time, rewarded that aggression. This was the age of the dot-com boom. Investors were pouring money into internet companies. New startups were going public at astonishing valuations. Traditional measures like profit often seemed less important than traffic, growth, market share, and the promise of dominating a new digital economy. Amazon became one of the great symbols of that era. Its stock soared. Its brand spread around the world. Its customer base exploded, and Bezos kept investing. In 1999, Amazon opened or expanded fulfillment capacity across the United States and Europe. The company added electronics, toys, home improvement products, software, video games, and other categories. It made investments in other internet businesses and entered alliances designed to extend its reach. The idea was bold. Build the infrastructure first. Win customers first. Achieve scale first. Profit could come later. But there was a dangerous assumption beneath the entire internet boom. That money would remain available. As long as investors believed in the future, companies could raise new capital, finance expansion, tolerate losses, and keep going. Then the mood changed. On March 10, 2000, the NASDAQ Composite reached its peak. The bubble began to burst. Over the following months, technology stocks collapsed. Companies that had once been celebrated as the future suddenly struggled to raise cash. Some disappeared almost overnight. The internet itself had not failed, but the belief that every internet company deserved unlimited money had. Amazon was now exposed. In 2000, the company generated $2.76 billion in sales. That sounded enormous, but growth had been purchased at tremendous cost. Amazon carried heavy debt, burned cash, and had built a sprawling organization designed for expansion. In the first quarter of 2000 alone, the company reported a pro forma net loss of $122 million. Then came a devastating wave of skepticism. In June 2000, Lehman Brothers bond analyst Ravi Surya warned that Amazon's financial position was extremely weak and that the company risked running out of cash if conditions did not improve. The market reacted brutally. Amazon shares had already fallen sharply from their late 1999 highs, and the criticism intensified fears that the company might become another casualty of the dot-com collapse. This was not an imaginary threat. Amazon had nearly $2 billion in debt. Its bonds carried low speculative grade ratings. And the market that had once rewarded losses in the name of growth was becoming far less forgiving. Yet Amazon had made one crucial move just before the worst of the collapse. In February 2000, the company raised 690 million euros through convertible bonds, worth roughly $680 million at the time. The timing mattered enormously. When capital markets tightened, Amazon already had additional cash. That did not guarantee survival, but it gave the company time. And time was exactly what it needed. The strategy now had to change. Amazon could no longer behave as though expansion alone was enough. It had to prove that the machine could become efficient. The company began cutting costs, improving inventory management, reducing fulfillment expenses, and demanding more discipline from its operations. Then, in January 2001, Amazon announced that it would eliminate approximately 1,300 jobs, about 15% of its workforce. For a company built around relentless growth, the message was unmistakable. The era of unlimited expansion was over. Fulfillment centers were consolidated, projects were re-examined, costs were attacked. The goal was no longer simply to get big fast. The goal was to stay alive long enough for scale to matter, and the numbers were still terrifying. In the fourth quarter of 2000, Amazon had recorded a GAAP net loss of $545 million. 1 year later, something changed. In the fourth quarter of 2001, Amazon reported its first GAAP quarterly profit, $5 million. For a company with billions in annual sales, the number was tiny. Symbolically, it was enormous. Amazon had demonstrated that the business could cross the line into profitability. It had survived the collapse of the market that created it. It had survived collapsing investor confidence. It had survived predictions that it might run out of cash. And it had done so without retreating back into being only a bookstore. By 2002, Amazon's international operations included sites in the United Kingdom, Germany, France, and Japan. The company was still expanding, but the philosophy was becoming more disciplined. Growth had to produce stronger economics. Warehouses had to become more efficient. Inventory had to move faster. Technology had to reduce friction. Customers had to return. The lesson of the dot-com crash was brutal. Scale without discipline could destroy a company, but scale combined with efficiency could become something much more powerful. Amazon had spent years building traffic, trust, technology, logistics, and customer relationships. Now Bezos needed a system that made all of those advantages reinforce one another, a system where lower prices attracted more customers attracted more sellers increased selection. Greater selection improved the customer experience. And more volume allowed Amazon to lower costs even further. The company had survived the fire. Now it was ready to build the flywheel. Amazon had survived the dot-com crash. But survival was not the same as victory. The company still carried debt, faced powerful competitors, and operated in an internet economy that was becoming more crowded every year. Jeff Bezos needed something stronger than growth alone. He needed a system that became more powerful as it grew. That system became known as the flywheel. The logic was simple. Lower prices attracted more customers. More customers created more traffic attracted more sellers. More sellers increased selection. Greater selection improved the customer experience, and higher volume allowed Amazon to spread costs over more transactions, creating room for even lower prices. Then the cycle began again. One of the most important pieces arrived in November 2000, when Amazon launched Marketplace in the United States. The idea was unusual for a retailer. Amazon would allow outside businesses and individuals to sell products directly alongside Amazon's own inventory. In traditional retail, a company controlled the shelves and protected them from competitors. Amazon opened its digital shelves. A customer looking at a product could see offers from Amazon and from independent sellers on the same page. New, used, and collectible items could compete in one place. A third-party seller could take a sale away from Amazon's own retail operation. But from the customer's point of view, the advantage was obvious: more choice, more price competition, more products available without Amazon having to buy and store every item itself. The results came quickly. By the fourth quarter of 2001, marketplace orders represented approximately 15% of total Amazon.com orders. By the first quarter of 2003, third-party seller transactions had grown to 19% of worldwide units. Amazon was learning that it did not need to own every product to benefit from the transaction. It could provide the website, customer traffic, payment experience, technology, and trust. Other sellers could provide inventory. And every new seller made the store more useful. But selection was only one side of the flywheel, price was another. After surviving the dot-com collapse, Amazon made an aggressive bet that seemed almost contradictory. Instead of protecting every dollar of margin, it deliberately gave some of it away. In January 2002, Amazon introduced free shipping in the United States for qualifying orders of at least $99. Then it lowered the threshold. In June, to $49. In August, to $25. Shipping was expensive. Giving it away reduced shipping revenue and pressured retail margins. But Bezos viewed free shipping as a marketing tool. A customer who trusted Amazon's prices and did not fear a large shipping charge had another reason to return. More purchases created more volume. More volume improved efficiency. Greater efficiency could support lower prices and better service. Again, the wheel turned. This was one of the strange features of Amazon's strategy. Many companies tried to maximize the profit from each transaction. Amazon focused on making the transaction attractive enough that the customer would come back again and again. The company was also redefining what customer experience meant. Online experience could mean a huge selection, fast search, customer reviews, personalized recommendations, reliable delivery, easy checkout, and low prices. The website itself became the store. Software became the salesperson. And every interaction helped improve the machine. By 2002, Amazon was no longer simply recovering from the dot-com crash. It was beginning to prove that its model could become stronger as it scaled. Marketplace expanded selection without requiring Amazon to own all the inventory. Third-party transactions created commissions and fees. Lower prices and free shipping helped drive unit sales. Higher volumes helped Amazon use its infrastructure more efficiently. The pieces were starting to reinforce one another. This did not mean the business had become easy. Free shipping could lose money. Warehouses remained expensive. International expansion was difficult. Technology required constant investment. And every new category introduced more complexity. But Amazon now had something more valuable than a temporary growth surge. It had a repeatable logic. In 2003, the company reported its first full-year net profit. The number was modest compared with what Amazon would eventually become. But it represented something crucial. The company that critics had once expected to run out of cash had survived, expanded, opened its platform to outside sellers, lowered prices, offered free shipping, and reached annual profitability. The fire had not destroyed Amazon. It had forced Amazon to become more disciplined. And that discipline made the flywheel turn faster. Yet one obstacle remained: shipping. Customers loved free delivery, but every order still involved a decision. Was the basket large enough to qualify? Was the shipping charge worth it? Should the customer wait and buy somewhere else? For Amazon, every moment of hesitation created friction. Bezos wanted to remove that friction, not with another coupon, not with another temporary promotion, but with a membership so ambitious that customers would pay in advance for the right to stop thinking about shipping altogether. The idea would cost Amazon heavily. Many inside the company feared it could be financially dangerous. But in 2005, Amazon was ready to make one of the biggest bets in its history: a $79 gamble called Prime. By 2004, Amazon had solved many of the problems that once threatened to destroy it. It had survived the dot-com crash. It had reached annual profitability. Marketplace was expanding selection. The flywheel was turning. But one source of friction remained every time a customer reached checkout: shipping. A shopper might find exactly what they wanted, put it in the cart, then hesitate. Was the order large enough to qualify for free shipping? Should they add something else? Should they wait? Should they buy from a store nearby instead? For a company obsessed with convenience, every one of those questions was a problem. Jeff Bezos wanted to make shipping disappear from the customer's mental calculation. The answer arrived in February 2005: Amazon Prime. For $79 a year, customers in the United States could receive unlimited free 2-day shipping on more than 1 million eligible items with no minimum purchase requirement. They could also upgrade to overnight delivery for $3.99 per item. The proposition was simple: pay once, then stop thinking about shipping. Before Prime, a customer might combine purchases to avoid shipping charges or delay an order until it felt worthwhile. After paying for Prime, the calculation changed. The more often a member ordered, the more valuable the membership felt. And the easier it became to order, the more reasons there were to return to Amazon. The flywheel had acquired a new engine, but there was an obvious danger: shipping was not free for Amazon. Every 2-day package still had to be picked, packed, transported, and delivered. If Prime members ordered frequently enough, the $79 annual fee might not cover the additional cost. And Amazon knew it. In its financial filings, the company warned that free shipping and membership offers reduced shipping revenue and gross margins. In the second quarter of 2005, Amazon reported a net shipping loss of $45 million, up 31% from the year before, primarily because of free shipping offers and Prime. The short-term economics could look painful, but Bezos had built Amazon by repeatedly choosing long-term customer loyalty over immediate margin. Prime was another version of that philosophy. In Amazon's 2005 shareholder letter, Bezos acknowledged that both free Super Saver shipping and Prime were expensive in the short term. He argued that they could become important and valuable over the long term because better customer experience could create a larger business and more free cash flow in the future. This was the gamble. Amazon would spend more today to make itself easier to choose tomorrow, not through a contract, through habit. Once a member had paid the annual fee, the psychological cost of placing one more order fell. The customer had already paid for the shipping benefit. Using it again felt natural. Prime made frequency more valuable to the customer. And frequency made each Prime member more valuable to Amazon. At launch, Prime was not an entertainment bundle. There was no Prime Video library, no streaming music, no gaming benefits. The original promise was brutally focused: fast shipping. That simplicity made the idea easy to understand but difficult to execute. Amazon now had to make 2-day delivery reliable across a growing catalog and an expanding customer base. That required more fulfillment capacity, better inventory placement, tighter operations, stronger software, and a deeper understanding of where products should be stored before customers ordered them. Prime was therefore not only a marketing program, it was pressure placed on the entire Amazon machine. Every new member raised expectations. Every additional order tested the fulfillment network. Every late package threatened trust. But the early signs were strong. By April 2006, 1 year after launch, Amazon said new Prime subscriptions were continuing to grow sequentially. During the previous holiday season, new subscriptions more than doubled from November to December. Prime was beginning to do exactly what Amazon needed. It was reducing hesitation, it was increasing loyalty, and it was making speed part of the product itself. For decades, retailers had competed over what they sold and what they charged. Amazon was now competing over how little the customer had to think, search, click, buy. 2 days later, the package arrived. The convenience that once seemed remarkable began to feel normal. And once customers accepted that standard, slower competitors faced a difficult choice: match it, or risk becoming less convenient. Prime would eventually expand far beyond shipping and become one of Amazon's most important strategic assets. But in 2005, none of that future was guaranteed. It was still a $79 gamble, a promise that Amazon would spend heavily now in exchange for deeper loyalty later. And while Prime was transforming the relationship between Amazon and its customers, another revolution was beginning inside the company. Amazon's own engineers needed computing infrastructure that could scale faster, become easier to use, and stop forcing every team to rebuild the same basic technology again and again. The solution would begin as internal infrastructure. Then Amazon would offer it to the world. And almost nobody understood how large it could become. Not a store, not a shipping program, but the invisible foundation beneath much of the modern internet: Amazon Web Services. Amazon had spent years teaching customers to trust a website with their books, electronics, credit cards, and deliveries. But behind that visible business was another machine: servers, databases, storage, software, networks. Every order placed on Amazon depended on technology that had to work at enormous scale. By the early 2000s, Amazon had learned a difficult lesson. Building a successful internet business was not only about creating a good product. Before developers could build the product, they first needed infrastructure. They needed computing power, they needed storage, they needed reliable systems that could survive sudden growth. For a startup, that often meant buying servers before knowing whether customers would ever arrive. A company could spend heavily on hardware, wait for equipment, install it, configure it, and still discover that it had bought too much capacity, or too little. Amazon saw an opportunity. What if computing infrastructure could be purchased like electricity? Use what you need. Pay for what you use. Scale up when demand rises. Scale down when it falls. No massive upfront investment. No need to own the physical servers. Amazon had already begun offering web services to developers before 2006, but that year marked the real beginning of the modern AWS era. On March 14, 2006, Amazon launched Simple Storage Service, S3. Developers could store and retrieve data over the internet through a simple interface. They did not have to buy the storage hardware themselves. They did not need to build a data center before launching an application. They could rent infrastructure from Amazon. At first, the service could seem almost too simple: storage. That was it. But simplicity was the point. Amazon was not trying to predict every application developers might create. It was providing a basic building block, a primitive, something developers could combine with other pieces to build whatever they wanted. Then, in August 2006, Amazon introduced another revolutionary building block: Elastic Compute Cloud, EC2. Now developers could rent computing capacity over the internet, A startup no longer needed to buy a room full of servers before testing an idea. It could launch virtual machines, use them as needed, and pay according to consumption. The economics of building an internet company had changed. Before cloud computing, infrastructure could be a major barrier to entry. With AWS, it became a variable cost. A small team with a limited budget could suddenly access computing resources that once required serious capital and long planning cycles. That did not guarantee success, but it lowered the cost of trying. For startups, speed could mean survival. For larger companies, flexibility could mean avoiding expensive unused capacity. Amazon was doing something that looked strange for a retailer. It was selling access to the invisible infrastructure behind software. No shelves, no packages, no delivery trucks, just computing power, storage, and an expanding set of technological services. The business was led by Andy Jassy, who became Amazon's senior vice president of web services in 2006. AWS expanded by adding focused services that developers could combine: storage, computing, databases, messaging, networking. The customer decided what to build. The cloud provided the pieces, and the advantage grew with scale. Amazon could invest in enormous data centers, specialized hardware, security systems, and global infrastructure. Customers could access those resources without making the same capital investment themselves. Over time, startups built entire businesses on AWS. Large companies moved workloads into the cloud. Governments and institutions adopted cloud infrastructure. The invisible empire was growing. For years, Amazon did not separately reveal AWS financial results. Then in 2015, the company broke AWS out as its own reporting segment. The scale surprised many observers. AWS generated $7.88 billion in net sales that year. More importantly, it produced $1.86 billion in operating income. The company, best known to the public for cardboard boxes and two-day shipping, had quietly built one of the most profitable engines inside Amazon, and the logic was completely different from retail. Retail was physical, warehouses, inventory, packaging, transportation. AWS was digital infrastructure sold on demand. The customer might never see an Amazon logo. They might simply open an app, stream content, use a website, or run business software without realizing that Amazon infrastructure was working underneath it. That was the power of the invisible empire. It did not need to be seen to become essential. AWS changed what kind of company Amazon was. Amazon was no longer simply a retailer that used advanced technology. It was now a technology infrastructure company serving other technology companies. A bookstore had become a platform. A platform had become a cloud. And while AWS was helping power the internet, Amazon was preparing to attack another industry built on physical objects. Books had started the company. Now, Amazon wanted to reinvent the book itself. No paper, no shelves, no waiting for delivery. In 2007, Jeff Bezos walked onto a stage and introduced a device called Kindle. Amazon was about to turn the product that created the company into software. Amazon had started with books. Now it wanted to reinvent them. On November 19, 2007, Jeff Bezos introduced the first Kindle. It was not the first electronic reader ever made, but Amazon approached the problem differently. The Kindle did not require a computer to download books. It used a wireless connection, allowing customers to browse the Kindle store, buy a title, and begin reading within minutes. At launch, more than 90,000 books were available. For a company built around shipping physical objects, the idea was almost radical. No warehouse pick, no cardboard box, no delivery truck. A book could move from Amazon to a customer instantly. The device was expensive at $399, and its design was awkward by modern standards. But the larger idea was powerful. Amazon was turning its original product into software. The consequences arrived quickly. By July 2010, Kindle book sales had surpassed hardcover sales on Amazon.com. 6 months later, Kindle books had overtaken paperback books as well. The company that had once threatened traditional bookstores was now helping transform publishing itself. But Amazon's hardware ambitions did not stop with reading. The company wanted a place in the customer's pocket, living room, and home. Sometimes that ambition worked. Sometimes it failed spectacularly. In June 2014, Amazon unveiled the Fire Phone. It was Amazon's first smartphone, built around features such as dynamic perspective and Firefly. The company was entering a market dominated by Apple and Android devices, where customers already had strong habits, app ecosystems, and brand loyalties. The Fire Phone did not break through. In 2014, Amazon recorded charges estimated at $170 million, primarily related to Fire Phone inventory valuation and supplier commitments. It was a costly reminder that scale did not guarantee success. Amazon could dominate online retail, build cloud infrastructure, and reinvent reading, but it could still misread the market. Yet 2014 also produced one of Amazon's most important hardware experiments, Echo. At first, it was available only by invitation. The device looked simple, a black cylinder designed around voice. Inside it lived Alexa. Customers could ask for music, weather, information, news, alarms, and eventually control compatible devices around the home. The important change was not the speaker itself. It was the interface. For decades, computing had required a keyboard, mouse, remote control, or touch screen. Alexa suggested another possibility: just speak. Echo had been developed for years before its debut, and Bezos later described it as an example of Amazon wandering into an idea customers had not explicitly requested. That was part of Amazon's innovation philosophy: listen to customers. But do not expect customers to invent the future for you. By June 2015, Echo was made available to all customers in the United States. Amazon now had a new doorway into daily life. A customer could wake up and ask for the weather, play music while cooking, add something to a shopping list, turn on a light, set a timer, order a product. The home itself was becoming an interface, and Amazon was no longer competing only for transactions. It was competing for attention, habit, and presence. Kindle had put Amazon into reading. Fire Phone had tried and failed to put Amazon into the smartphone. Echo and Alexa put Amazon into the room. Each experiment followed the same, deeper logic. Reduce friction. Make the service easier to reach. Shorten the distance between wanting something and getting it. Sometimes the result was a breakthrough. Sometimes it was a $170 million mistake. Amazon kept experimenting anyway, because the next great business might begin as a product nobody was asking for. And while devices pulled Amazon deeper into people's homes, the company was building another advantage in the physical world. Warehouses were becoming fulfillment centers. Fulfillment centers were becoming automated systems. Robots were moving shelves. Aircraft were joining delivery networks. And Amazon was preparing to expand into groceries, entertainment, and logistics on a scale that would make the company far more difficult to define. The next empire would not be invisible. It would be everywhere. By the middle of the 2000s, Amazon was no longer just a website. It had become a physical system. Warehouses, robots, trucks, airplanes, grocery stores, entertainment platforms. Every new layer made the company harder to describe and harder to compete with. One of the biggest changes began in 2012. Amazon agreed to acquire Kiva Systems for approximately $775 million. Kiva built mobile robots that could move shelves of products through warehouses. Instead of forcing workers to walk long distances searching for inventory, the shelves could come to them. The idea was simple: make the product move, not the person. Inside Amazon's fulfillment centers, this changed the physical logic of the warehouse. Software-directed robots beneath storage pods carried them across the floor and delivered them to workstations where employees could pick the required items. The warehouse was becoming a coordinated machine, but Amazon was expanding far beyond fulfillment. In 2014, the company agreed to buy Twitch for approximately $970 million. Twitch was a live streaming platform built around gaming, with more than 55 million unique visitors in July 2014 alone. For Amazon, it was another doorway into attention. Customers no longer came only to buy things. They could watch, listen, read, play, stream. Then Amazon attacked one of the hardest parts of its business: transportation. Prime had changed expectations. Two-day delivery was no longer a luxury, it was becoming the standard. To control speed, Amazon needed more control over the journey. In 2016, the company revealed Amazon One, its first branded cargo airplane. At the time, Amazon had agreements to lease 40 dedicated aircraft, 11 of which were already flying, along with a dedicated network of 4,000 trailers. The company that had once shipped books from a garage was building its own air cargo network. Then came groceries. In June 2017, Amazon announced that it would acquire Whole Foods Market in a transaction valued at approximately $13.7 billion, including debt. The deal gave Amazon something the internet alone could not provide: hundreds of physical grocery stores, a real-world footprint, perishable inventory, local customers. Another reason for Prime members to stay inside the Amazon ecosystem. The boundaries were disappearing, online and offline, retail and entertainment, software and logistics, digital infrastructure and physical infrastructure. Amazon was building across all of them. And in 2018, the company launched its Delivery Service Partner Program, helping independent entrepreneurs build businesses delivering Amazon packages. The last mile was becoming another part of the machine. This was the deeper transformation. Amazon no longer wanted to be simply the place where an order began. It wanted influence over almost every stage that followed: where inventory was stored, how products moved inside a warehouse, how packages traveled between cities, and how they arrived at the customer's door. The advantage was not one warehouse, or one robot, or one airplane. It was the connection between them. Software could predict demand. Inventory could be positioned closer to customers. Robots could accelerate picking. Aircraft and trailers could move packages across regions. Delivery stations could prepare them for the final mile. Each piece supported the others. And once the network reached enormous scale, matching it required more than building a better website. A competitor needed warehouses, technology, transportation capacity, inventory, data, capital, and time. Amazon had spent decades accumulating all of them. But the machine came with a cost. The larger Amazon became, the more workers it employed, and the more power it gained over sellers, suppliers, competitors, and customers. Its scale attracted admiration and criticism. Questions about working conditions, market power, competition, taxes, and the treatment of third-party sellers became increasingly difficult to ignore. Then in 2020, the entire system faced a test nobody had designed it for. A global pandemic closed stores, disrupted supply chains, changed daily life, and pushed millions of people toward online shopping. Demand exploded. Amazon hired at extraordinary speed. Warehouses came under immense pressure. Revenue surged. So did scrutiny. The machine had been built for growth. Now the world was about to discover what happened when almost everyone needed it at once. At the end of 2019, Amazon had built a machine designed for speed. Then the world stopped. In early 2020, COVID-19 spread across the globe. Offices closed, restaurants emptied, millions of people stayed home. Physical stores shut their doors or limited access, but people still needed food. Household supplies, medicine, computers, books, almost everything. And suddenly, Amazon was no longer just convenient. For many customers, it felt essential. Demand surged through a network that had never been designed for a shock of this scale. Amazon temporarily lengthened some delivery promises, prioritized essential goods, restricted certain products entering its warehouses, and raced to add workers. By June 2020, the company said it had hired 175,000 additional people in response to pandemic demand. The numbers became enormous. Amazon's annual sales jumped from about $280.5 billion in 2019 to $386.1 billion in 2020, a 38% increase in a single year. By the end of 2020, Amazon employed approximately 1.3 million full-time and part-time workers. The machine was expanding at extraordinary speed. Warehouses, delivery stations, aircraft, trucks, data centers. In 2020 alone, Amazon increased the square footage of its fulfillment and logistics network by 50%. But the same scale that made Amazon indispensable also made every problem larger. Warehouse employees worked through a global health emergency. Some workers publicly raised concerns about infection risks and workplace safety. Amazon said it invested heavily in testing, protective equipment, cleaning, additional pay, and other COVID-related measures, but criticism continued. In February 2021, the New York Attorney General filed a lawsuit alleging that Amazon had failed to provide adequate health and safety protections at 2 New York facilities and had retaliated against employees who raised safety concerns. The case represented allegations, not a final finding of liability. But the controversy revealed a deeper tension at the center of the Amazon machine. Customers wanted faster delivery. Investors wanted growth. Sellers wanted access to Amazon's marketplace. Workers faced the pressure required to make the system move. The bigger Amazon became, the harder it was to separate convenience from the human cost of producing it. And the questions went beyond warehouses. In July 2020, Jeff Bezos appeared before Congress alongside the leaders of Apple, Facebook, and Google. For years, Amazon had presented itself as a company obsessed with customers. Now lawmakers were asking another question. Had it become too powerful? Amazon sold its own products. It also operated the marketplace where outside sellers competed. It controlled search results, logistics services, advertising tools, customer data, and access to hundreds of millions of shoppers. For small businesses, Amazon could be an extraordinary opportunity. It could also be a gatekeeper. In October 2020, a U.S. House antitrust investigation concluded that Amazon and other major technology platforms possessed significant market power and called for stronger competition rules. Amazon rejected accusations that it was a monopoly and argued that retail remained intensely competitive. The debate was no longer about whether Amazon had succeeded. It was about what that success meant. Then the expansion continued. Amazon's sales reached approximately $469.8 billion in 2021. By the end of that year, the company employed about 1.6 million people. In only 2 years, the Amazon machine had grown at a pace that would have seemed almost impossible before the pandemic. But explosive growth created a new danger. Amazon had built warehouses, hired workers, expanded delivery capacity, and added infrastructure for a world trapped at home. What would happen when that world reopened? When customers returned to stores, when growth slowed, when the company discovered that it had built too much, too fast? The pandemic had made Amazon more powerful than ever. It had also made the company heavier. And in 2021, another historic transition was approaching. Jeff Bezos, the founder, who had led Amazon from a garage to one of the largest companies on earth, was preparing to step down as CEO. The man chosen to replace him knew the invisible empire better than almost anyone. Andy Jassy had built AWS. Now he would inherit all of Amazon: the warehouses, the workers, the cloud, the devices, the controversies, and the consequences of expansion on a scale the company had never attempted before. The Bezos era was ending. The next leader would have to decide what came after day one. On July 5, 2021, the Jeff Bezos era ended. After 27 years leading Amazon from a garage startup to one of the most powerful companies on earth, Bezos stepped down as chief executive. His successor was Andy Jassy. Jassy was not an outsider. He had joined Amazon in 1997 and helped build Amazon Web Services from an internal idea into the company's most profitable business. Now he inherited everything: Prime, AWS, Alexa, Whole Foods, Twitch, aircraft, delivery networks, more than 1 million employees, and a problem. Amazon had expanded at extraordinary speed during the pandemic, adding workers, warehouses, transportation capacity, and infrastructure for a world suddenly dependent on online shopping. Then the world reopened. Demand patterns changed, growth slowed, and the network built for emergency conditions became more expensive to operate. In 2022, Amazon generated $514 billion in net sales. Yet the company reported a net loss of $2.7 billion, heavily affected by a $12.7 billion pre-tax valuation loss on its investment in Rivian. More importantly, Amazon had to confront the consequences of expanding too quickly. Jassy began cutting. Projects were reduced, warehouse expansion slowed, teams were reorganized, and jobs disappeared. In January 2023, Amazon said it planned to eliminate just over 18,000 roles. 2 months later, it announced another 9,000 reductions. For a company that had spent years hiring at enormous speed, the reversal was dramatic. The new era would not be built on growth at any cost. It would be built on efficiency. Amazon restructured its U.S. fulfillment network into 8 regions, storing more products closer to customers and reducing the distance packages had to travel. The goal was not to make the machine smaller, it was to make the machine smarter. Faster delivery could become cheaper delivery. Better inventory placement could reduce transportation. Every efficiency gain could strengthen the same flywheel Amazon had been building for decades. The results were substantial. Amazon's operating income rose from $12.2 billion in 2022 to $36.9 billion in 2023 and $68.6 billion in 2024. But while Jassy was repairing the physical empire, another technology race was accelerating: artificial intelligence. Generative AI created a new battle for computing power, custom chips, foundation models, and cloud infrastructure. For Amazon, the opportunity ran directly through AWS. The company invested heavily in data centers, Trainium and Graviton chips, Amazon Bedrock, and partnerships with AI companies including Anthropic. Once again, Amazon was trying to build the infrastructure beneath a technological revolution. By 2025, the scale was extraordinary. Amazon generated $716.9 billion in annual net sales. Operating income reached $80 billion. AWS alone produced $128.7 billion in sales and $45.6 billion in operating income. The online bookstore had become a corporation spanning retail, cloud computing, advertising, streaming, groceries, logistics, robotics, artificial intelligence, and satellites. And yet the original philosophy remained. Day 1. Move quickly, experiment, accept failure, think long-term, obsess over customers. The challenge was that Amazon was no longer the small insurgent attacking slow incumbents. Amazon was now the incumbent. Its decisions could affect workers, sellers, publishers, developers, competitors, cities, and entire industries. Its convenience had reached extraordinary scale. So had the questions about its power. How much influence should one platform have over commerce? How should workers share in the gains created by automation and speed? And can a company with hundreds of billions of dollars in annual sales still honestly behave as though every morning is day one? There is no final answer. Because Amazon is still moving, still expanding AWS, still investing in AI, robotics, faster delivery, and satellites, still searching for the next small idea that could become enormous tomorrow. The company began by asking a simple question. Could people be convinced to buy books on the internet? 3 decades later, that question feels almost absurdly small. The garage became a bookstore. The bookstore became a marketplace. The marketplace became a logistics network. The network became a cloud. The cloud became infrastructure beneath other companies. And the company itself became an empire. But every empire eventually faces the same test. Not whether it can become powerful, but what it chooses to do with that power, and whether the principles that created its success can survive the scale of what it has become. Amazon began with a question. Could people be convinced to buy books on the internet? In 1994, that question was not obvious. The web was new. Online shopping was unfamiliar. Most people had never entered a credit card number into a website. But Jeff Bezos saw something others did not. He saw speed. Not the speed of delivery, the speed at which the internet itself was growing. And from that observation came a company that would eventually reach far beyond books. Amazon survived years of losses. It survived the dot-com crash. It opened its marketplace to outside sellers. It turned shipping into a membership. It rented computing power to the world. It reinvented reading. It entered homes through voice. It bought grocery stores. It built warehouses filled with robots, created an air cargo network, expanded into entertainment, and became infrastructure beneath countless digital businesses. Some bets became enormous successes. Others failed. The Fire Phone disappeared. Projects were canceled. Billions were spent on ideas that never became the next Prime or AWS. But failure was never the opposite of Amazon's strategy. It was part of it. The company was willing to lose on individual experiments because a single breakthrough could change the economics of the entire empire. That is what happened with AWS. What began as a solution to internal technical problems became one of Amazon's most profitable businesses and a foundation for startups, corporations, governments, and developers around the world. That is what happened with Prime. A $79 shipping gamble became a deeper relationship between Amazon and its customers. And that is what happened with the marketplace. Amazon stopped needing to own every product on the shelf because it could own the platform where the transaction happened. This is why Amazon became so difficult to define. Is it a retailer, a logistics company, a cloud provider, an advertising business, a streaming platform, a hardware company, an artificial intelligence company? The answer is all of them. And that may be Amazon's greatest advantage. Each business can strengthen another. Prime drives loyalty. The marketplace increases selection. The logistics network increases speed. AWS generates technology and profit. Advertising monetizes attention. Data improves decisions. Scale creates more scale. The flywheel keeps turning. But the same scale that makes Amazon extraordinary also makes it controversial. A company this large does not affect only customers. It affects workers, sellers, competitors, publishers, developers, communities, and entire industries. The convenience of one-click shopping is real. So are the questions about labor, market power, competition, automation, and how much influence one company should have over the infrastructure of modern life. That tension is now part of Amazon's story, and perhaps it always will be. By 2025, Amazon was generating hundreds of billions of dollars in annual sales, while AWS alone had become a business with more than $100 billion in yearly revenue. The garage bookstore was gone. In its place stood a global system of fulfillment centers, data centers, aircraft, delivery vehicles, algorithms, robots, satellites, devices, stores, and software. Yet the most important thing Amazon built may not be any single product. It may be the belief that almost any friction can be removed. Waiting for a book, paying for shipping, buying servers, finding a movie, ordering groceries, running an AI model. Again and again, Amazon asked the same question: why should this be difficult? Then it built a machine to make it easier. The danger is that no machine grows forever without consequences. Every new level of scale creates new responsibilities. Every increase in power creates new scrutiny. And every empire eventually reaches a point where the hardest challenge is no longer growth. It is deciding what kind of empire it wants to become. That is the question Amazon now faces. Not whether it can keep expanding. History has already shown that it can. The real question is whether a company built around the philosophy of day one can remain hungry, innovative, and customer-focused after becoming one of the largest corporations in the world. Maybe the answer will come from artificial intelligence, maybe from robotics, maybe from space, or maybe from an idea that today sounds as small and unlikely as selling books on the internet once did. Amazon's story is not finished. The flywheel is still turning. The machine is still learning. And somewhere inside the empire, another experiment has already begun. Thank you for watching this video all the way to the end. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe to Driven Empires, give it a like, and leave a comment. And until the next empire, thanks for watching.